They mocked him in front of the whole school. Laughed when he stumbled. They said he didn't belong, that he was nothing. Pause, faint whisper of laughter fades out. But what they didn't know was that the nobody they humiliated was the hidden son of a royal bloodline, a prince in exile. Music builds, slow African drums strings swell. He left in shame, but he didn't stay gone. He returned, not with anger, but with power, wisdom, and a crown they could never take from him. Because sometimes, the one they break in public is the one destined to rise in silence and make the whole world bow. Music climaxes, drumbeat hits, short silence. This is. They humiliated him publicly, then he returned as the prince they feared. Where pain meets purpose, and dignity wears the crown. They said he didn't belong here. That his accent was too thick. His clothes too simple. His dreams, too big for a boy like him. But what they didn't know was that beneath that quiet face, beneath the worn backpack and thrifted shoes, slept a prince, hidden in plain sight. This is the story of Daniel Okoro, the boy they humiliated, and the man they would one day kneel before. Sound, distant city traffic, students chatting, footsteps echoing in a college courtyard. Daniel arrived at the prestigious Ridgeview University, one of America's most elite schools. He came from Nigeria, the son of a traditional ruler, but he never told anyone. He just wanted to be treated like everyone else. He spoke softly, studied hard, worked nights at the campus library, and every evening, when the lights dimmed, he'd sit on the stairs, looking out at the campus skyline, whispering to himself, "One day, I'll make my father proud." But pride was something Ridgeview didn't give easily, especially to someone like him. Sound, laughter echoing, phones snapping pictures. At first, it was little things. His classmates would mimic his accent during presentations. They'd snicker when he dressed in traditional African shirts. One girl once said, "You're sweet, Daniel, but you talk funny. Like National Geographic funny." He smiled it off. He always smiled. Because that's what his mother taught him. Never let them see your pain. But behind that smile, his heart was bruising. Sound, upbeat music, clinking glasses, loud laughter. One Friday night, Daniel got an unexpected invitation. A fraternity house party, hosted by Ethan Brooks, one of the most powerful and arrogant students on campus. The son of a senator. The kind of man who thought the world revolved around his last name. When Daniel arrived, the room went silent for a moment, then laughter filled the air. "You actually came?" Ethan smirked. "Man, I told you it was formal, not farmwear." Everyone laughed. Cameras flashed. Daniel's smile trembled, but he said quietly, "Thank you for inviting me." That night, the laughter never stopped. Every step he took, every word he said, was turned into a joke. And yet he stayed polite, respectful, even as humiliation wrapped around him like a cold fog. Sound, music cuts. A wallet drops. Murmurs spread. Just when the night seemed over, Ethan's friend shouted, "Hey! My wallet's missing!" People started searching. A few minutes later, someone yelled, "Check the African guy's bag!" Daniel froze. His heart pounded. He looked around, confused. "What? Why would you?" Before he could finish, Ethan grabbed his bag and emptied it on the table. Books. Notes. A photo of his mother. And then, a wallet. A collective gasp filled the room. Phones went up. Cameras started recording. Ethan crossed his arms and said, "Caught red-handed. Guess they don't teach honesty where you come from." Daniel's voice cracked. "That's not mine. I didn't take it." But no one listened. Someone shouted, "Call security!" And within minutes 2 campus officers arrived and dragged him outside, into the cold night air. Sound, rain begins to fall softly. Crowd murmuring. Camera shutters. Under the pouring rain, in front of the entire dorm courtyard, Daniel stood, soaked, shivering, and surrounded by laughter. Students filmed as security held him by the arm. Ethan walked up slowly, smirking. You should have stayed in whatever village you came from, man. You don't belong here. Daniel's jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists, then loosened. He looked up, straight into Ethan's eyes, and said softly, One day, the truth will walk through these doors. Ethan laughed. Yeah? And when it does, make sure it kneels first. Security pushed Daniel toward the gate as the laughter roared behind him. But in the distance, lightning flashed, and for a moment, Daniel's eyes burned not with shame, but with something Ethan couldn't recognize. Fire. The fire of a prince awakening. Sound, quiet rain, faint thunder. That night, Daniel sat alone at a bus stop, drenched, his suitcase beside him. He scrolled through his phone, watching clips of his humiliation spreading online. The captions read, African thief gets caught. Prince of poverty. Campus joke of the year. His vision blurred with tears. He whispered, Father, if you can hear me, forgive me. I couldn't protect your name. But then, his phone rang. An international number. He answered weakly. Hello? A deep, familiar voice replied. My son, it's time you come home. The voice of his father, the king of Oru. And with that, Daniel closed his eyes. The humiliation would end. But his becoming was just beginning. They broke him that night. But they didn't know that princes are never truly defeated. They only retreat, to rise again. Sometimes, you have to be broken in public. To rise in silence. They laughed at him. They called him a thief, a joke, a nobody. But destiny has a strange way of rewriting pain, turning shame into the seed of power. This is where Daniel's true story begins. Sound, plane engines humming, muffled airport announcements. Daniel sat by the window of a nearly empty flight, staring at the dark clouds below. The rain lashed against the glass like a mirror of his thoughts. He hadn't told anyone at school he was leaving. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just a quiet exit, with a heart full of questions. The voice of his father echoed in his memory. My son, the world has shown you its mask. Now come see your own face. He didn't fully understand those words yet. But he was about to. The Lagos air hit him, warm, heavy, alive. He hadn't been home in years. From the airport, a black SUV waited quietly at the curb. Inside sat a man in traditional white robes and dark glasses. He stepped out and bowed slightly. Welcome home, Prince Daniel. Daniel froze. Please don't call me that, he said quietly. The man smiled. You may hide from the world, my prince. But your blood cannot hide from itself. They drove for hours, past dusty roads, palm trees, and distant villages, until they reached the gates of Oru Kingdom. Tall golden gates. Drummers. Villagers bowing. The guards dropped to their knees as he stepped out. For the first time in years he felt it, the weight of his name. Sound, royal drums, the echo of sandals on marble, a low wind hum inside a palace hall. The palace was vast, carved pillars, ancient masks, and golden tapestries of past kings. At the end of the long hall sat his father, King Adigwe Okoro, regal yet aged by grief. The king rose slowly and opened his arms. My son, you have returned. Daniel knelt before him, head bowed. I have brought shame to our name, father. The king shook his head. No. You have brought light. For even gold must be tested by fire. He walked closer, placing a heavy hand on Daniel's shoulder. The world mocked you because you forgot who you are. But now you will remember. Then the king called out. Bring him to the chamber of echoes. Sound, torch crackling, deep cave reverb, faint chanting voices. The chamber was hidden beneath the palace, walls lined with carved faces of past rulers. Daniel followed the chief priest, Eldenkem, a man with a staff that glowed faintly in the dark. Eldenkem spoke. Every prince must enter the silence before he can command the storm. Daniel watched as the elder poured water over an ancient stone and said, This water remembers the blood of every king before you. To lead, you must first kneel before truth. Daniel knelt. The cold water touched his skin, and he felt something shift. Visions flashing before his eyes. The laughter of Ethan. The rain. The shame. But then he saw something else. A lion standing in front of him. Unmoving. Unafraid. The elder's voice thundered. Rise, Daniel. Your humiliation was your coronation. Your pain, the price of your awakening. Daniel stood, eyes burning with a quiet fire. Sound morning birds soared clashing, heavy breathing. Days turned into weeks. Under his father's command, Daniel trained with the royal guards. Combat. Strategy. Diplomacy. He studied his ancestors' wars, their triumphs, their betrayals. Every morning at sunrise he ran through the fields, sweat mixing with dust. Every night, he sat by the palace balcony, reading leadership scrolls. Sometimes, his father would join him. Son, he'd say, power is not in the crown. It's in the silence before the storm. Daniel listened. He learned. And slowly, the timid student they mocked in America began to disappear. In his place, rose something different. Stronger. Sharper. Royal. Sound, pen scratching paper, quiet instrumental background. One evening, while going through old things, Daniel found his laptop, still loaded with messages from Ridgeview. One new message stood out. Daniel, please don't come back. People here still talk about the video. He stared at the screen, anger flickering. But then, he smiled faintly. They talk because they haven't seen what silence builds. He opened a blank email and wrote, To those who mocked me, thank you. You made me remember who I am. He didn't send it. He just saved it as a draft, waiting for the day he'd return. Sound, night insects, slow drums, wind blowing through trees. That night, he stood before his father again. Father, I want to return. But not as the boy they humiliated. The king smiled. Then return as what you truly are. He handed Daniel a ring, the royal seal of Oru. The blood of kings flows through you. Go, my son. But remember, forgiveness is a greater weapon than revenge. Daniel bowed deeply. I will remember. As he walked out of the throne room, the torches dimmed one by one. And in the darkness, his footsteps echoed like a prophecy. Narrator, final line, low and powerful. He left as a broken student. He returned as a prince in exile. And soon, the world that mocked him would learn the cost of underestimating royalty. Years had passed since Daniel Okoro left Ridgeview University in shame. To the world, he had vanished. But silence, as they say, is where kings sharpen their swords. And now, he was coming back. Not as a victim. Not as a student. But as the man they would never forget. Sound, jet engines fading, doors opening, city bustle. A black luxury car pulled into the heart of the city. Inside sat a man in his late 20s, tall, sharp suit, calm eyes. Daniel looked out at the campus sign, Ridgeview University. The same gates that once closed behind him now stood open. But this time, he didn't walk in with a backpack and hope. He walked in with a purpose, and a name powerful enough to rewrite everything. He was here as Daniel Adigwe Okoro, newly appointed board benefactor, a private donor representing an African Royal Foundation, funding global education. No one knew he was the same boy they had humiliated. He wanted to see who they had become, and who he had to forgive. Sound, papers shuffling, clock ticking, distant student chatter. Dean Matthews, now older and wearier, stood nervously by his desk as Daniel entered. Mr. Okoro! We're honored to have you with us, he said, extending his hand. Daniel smiled politely. The honor is mine, Dean. I believe we all deserve second chances, don't you? The dean chuckled awkwardly, not recognizing him. He spoke about new visions and diversity inclusion, the kind of speeches meant to erase past mistakes. Daniel listened quietly. His mind flashed back to that day, the rain, the laughter, the false accusation. When the dean finished, Daniel simply said, You'll see changes here soon, from the ground up. As he left the office, his eyes caught a framed newspaper on the wall. Student expelled over theft scandal, university praised for swift justice. And under it, his own picture. He smiled faintly. We'll rewrite that headline soon, he whispered. Scene 3, the cafeteria reunion. Sound cafeteria buzz, trays clattering, low music. It was almost noon when Daniel walked into the cafeteria, the same one where his public humiliation had started years ago. A group of professors and students gathered for a casual lunch with the new sponsor. Among them was Ethan Collins, now a senior lecturer in business ethics, the same man who'd once accused him. Daniel approached with a warm smile. Mr. Collins, is it? I've heard a lot about your work. Ethan looked up, surprised. Oh, yes, thank you, sir. It's an honor. Daniel studied him for a moment. He saw the slight tremor in Ethan's hands, the faint nervousness in his laugh. You know, Daniel said softly, you remind me of someone I once knew here. A man who mistook pride for truth. Ethan's smile faded. Something in Daniel's tone made his stomach twist. But he said nothing. The lunch continued, polite words, hidden meanings. And by the time Daniel left, Ethan felt uneasy, as if the ghosts of his past were walking again. Sound footsteps echoing, hushed voices. That evening, rumors began to spread. Students whispered that the mysterious African donor wasn't just rich, he was royalty. Some said he owned tech companies. Others said he was a prince in disguise. Meanwhile, Daniel walked through the old library, fingers tracing the wooden tables he used to study at. He paused by a familiar corner. That was where he'd been accused. That was where his life changed. He whispered quietly. You took everything from me here. But now I came back with peace in my hands, not revenge. Still, a part of him burned quietly. A test was coming. Sound, elegant music, crowd chatter, glasses clinking. A week later, the university held a grand gala to honor Daniel's foundation. Reporters filled the room. Cameras flashed. Everyone wanted to impress the young benefactor. Dean Matthews gave a long speech about redemption and growth. Ethan sat at a table nearby, his eyes darting nervously toward Daniel. Then Daniel took the stage. He looked calm, royal even, his voice deep and measured. There was a time, he began, when this place taught me pain instead of purpose. When truth was buried beneath pride, and a student was judged not by his actions, but by his skin, his accent, his silence. The room fell quiet. Ethan froze. Dean Matthews swallowed hard. Daniel continued. But I am not here for revenge. I am here to build. To ensure no young soul ever walks out of these gates humiliated again. Thunderous applause followed, but those who had wronged him didn't clap. They just stared. Because deep down they knew. Sound, door creaking open, muffled voices in an office. Later that night, after the gala, Ethan waited for Daniel in the parking lot. His voice shook as he said, You're him, aren't you? The boy from years ago. Daniel turned slowly, eyes calm. You finally remember. Ethan stammered. I didn't know. I was under pressure, they told me. Daniel raised a hand. Save it. I forgave you the moment I stopped needing your apology. He walked past Ethan, then stopped. But understand this, humility isn't a weakness. It's the crown of kings. Ethan dropped to his knees, tears filling his eyes. Daniel didn't turn back. He simply said, Stand up, Ethan. You still have time to rewrite your story. And he walked into the night, the prince the world once broke, now the man who taught them grace. Sound, city wind, faint music, church bells in the distance. Back in his hotel room, Daniel sat by the window, watching the city lights. He thought of his father's words again. Forgiveness is a greater weapon than revenge. He smiled. He finally understood. He had returned not to prove his worth, but to remind the world that worth never dies. The boy they humiliated was gone. The prince they feared had taken his place. He didn't need revenge. He became the lesson. Some truths are like the sunrise. No matter how long the night lasts, they can't stay hidden forever. And for Daniel Okoro, the sun was about to rise. For years, the world saw him as a student humiliated, a man forgotten. But the next morning, the entire university, and the nation, would know his real name. Prince Daniel Adigwe Okoro of Ora Kingdom. Scene 1. The news breaks. Sound, morning news intro, chatter, camera clicks. The next day began like any other, until it didn't. On every screen in the Ridgeview campus, news anchors read the same headline. Royal Foundation confirms, Ridgeview's new benefactor is an African prince. Students froze in hallways. Professors stared in disbelief. The man they'd dined with, the one they'd mocked, was royalty. Dean Matthews nearly dropped his coffee when he saw Daniel's palace photo on the news. Beside it was an old image, a grainy one, of Daniel being dragged out years ago. The same man. The same eyes. His assistant whispered, trembling. "Sir, it's him. The boy from the theft scandal." The dean sat down slowly. His heart pounded. "Dear God, what have we done?" Sound, students talking loudly, phones buzzing, footsteps rushing. By noon, Ridgeview was in chaos. Every student wanted to know more. Every teacher wanted to forget. Old videos resurfaced online, clips of Daniel being mocked and escorted out by security. One showed Ethan laughing in the background. Another caught a staff member calling him the African thief. Now those same people couldn't even look at a camera. The university's social media page was flooded with comments. How could they do this? This is the man funding their scholarships now? He forgave them? It wasn't just trending. It was a reckoning. Sound, quiet music, pen scratching, faint rain outside. Inside his hotel suite, Daniel sat at a desk filled with letters and files. His foundation lawyer stood beside him. "Your Highness," the lawyer said respectfully, "we've prepared statements. The world wants to hear from you. You can expose them if you wish." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked at an old photo, him as a boy, barefoot, standing beside his father's throne. He remembered what his father had once said. "Son, power isn't how loud you roar. It's how calmly you rise." Daniel looked up. "No revenge. We'll do something better." "What's that, sir?" Daniel smiled faintly. "We'll turn their shame into education. Set up a scholarship for students who've been silenced or humiliated, just like I was." The lawyer hesitated, surprised. "You're really forgiving them?" "Forgiving isn't for them," Daniel said softly. "It's for me." Sound, cameras flashing, murmurs, microphones tapping. The next day, Ridgeview University held an emergency press conference. Reporters filled the hall. On stage sat Dean Matthews, pale and shaken, and beside him, Daniel, calm as sunrise. "We owe this man a deep apology," the dean said, voice trembling. "Our institution failed him years ago. But today, we begin to make it right." Daniel took the microphone. "There's no need for apologies," he began. "What happened to me taught me more than any classroom ever could." He paused, scanning the room. Cameras zoomed in on his face. "I came here as a boy seeking knowledge. I left broken, but I found something greater, truth. And now, I return not to take back what was lost, but to give what I never received." He announced a new initiative. The Dignity Fund, scholarships for underprivileged students facing discrimination. Applause thundered through the hall. Reporters shouted questions. Daniel simply bowed his head, smiled, and said, "My story began here in humiliation. It ends here, in healing." Sound, door closes softly, echoing footsteps. After the press conference, Ethan found Daniel alone in the corridor. Tears streaked his face. He fell to his knees, whispering, "I don't deserve your mercy. I destroyed you. I ruined your life." Daniel looked down at him, his eyes calm but heavy. "You didn't destroy me, Ethan. You revealed me." Ethan sobbed. "Why didn't you expose me? You could have." Daniel interrupted gently. Because pain taught me what power really is, restraint. He extended a hand. Ethan hesitated, then took it. Daniel helped him stand. Stand tall, Ethan. You'll carry the guilt until you turn it into good. Ethan nodded, voice shaking. I'll spend the rest of my life doing just that. Daniel smiled faintly. Then maybe we both learn something. Sound, news clips, social media notifications, soft piano underlay. Within hours, major news outlets covered the story. Humiliated student returns as prince, funds university that expelled him. CNN, BBC, New York Times, all shared his image. The internet called him the Prince of Forgiveness. Thousands of people, especially young black students, flooded his foundation site, thanking him for his grace. For the first time, the university became a symbol of change instead of shame. Sound, evening breeze, faint African flute. That night, Daniel stood alone in the university courtyard. The same courtyard where they dragged him years ago. Now, it was silent. Peaceful. He looked up at the sky and whispered, Father! I did it my way. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Not of pain, but of release. He smiled softly. Let them remember, not the prince who punished them, but the man who rose above them. Music swells gently. Fade to quiet. Some victories are loud. Others, just breathe. Daniel's story wasn't about revenge. It was about rising, until even those who broke you bow to the light you carry. Forgiveness is not the end of a story, it's the beginning of a legacy. And for Prince Daniel Adigwe Okoro, his legacy was just beginning. Sound, school bells, laughter, calm morning breeze. A year had passed since the revelation. The once proud Ridgeview University, the place where Daniel was humiliated, had transformed. The Dignity Fund had already sponsored over 200 students. Walls that once echoed with gossip now carried murals of unity, diversity, and courage. At the entrance stood a bronze statue, a young man with a book in one hand and a crown in the other. The plaque read, He knelt in pain, but rose in purpose. Prince Daniel Adigwe Okoro. Every freshman passed that statue on their first day. And every student who once mocked him now spoke his name with reverence. Sound, applause, camera shutters, slow regal drums. Ridgeview held its grandest event in years, the ceremony of honor, to commemorate the partnership with the Okoro Royal Foundation. The auditorium was filled. Royal banners hung side by side with university flags. Reporters from around the world lined the hall. Dean Matthews stood at the podium. We once expelled him in shame. Today, we welcome him in glory. The crowd erupted in applause. And then, from the back, Daniel entered, dressed in traditional royal attire. Gold-trimmed agbada, calm eyes, gentle smile. He didn't walk like a man seeking vengeance. He walked like one who had made peace with every wound. When he took the stage, silence filled the hall. Once upon a time, he began softly. I stood outside these walls with tears in my eyes, thinking I was a failure. But today, I stand not to boast, but to remind you, pain can polish a man until he shines. He paused, scanning the audience. Every humiliation I faced became a brick in the foundation of who I am. You cannot bury a seed and expect it to die, it will grow. The hall stood in thunderous applause. Even the dean's eyes glistened with tears. Sound, quiet corridor, echo of footsteps. After the ceremony, a frail woman waited by the hallway. Her name, Mrs. Wallace, the staff member who once accused Daniel falsely. She was older now, humbled, clutching a small Bible. Your Highness, she whispered, trembling, I don't deserve to speak to you. I destroyed you. Daniel turned gently, his tone soft. You destroyed a name, ma'am, not the man. She began to cry. I lost everything after that scandal. My job, my peace. I prayed I'd see you one last time. Daniel took a step closer, his eyes kind. Then today, your prayer is answered. You're forgiven. She broke down in tears, holding his hands. He smiled faintly. We both learned. That's enough. Sound fades to soft flute, symbolic closure. Daniel returned home to Aura Kingdom after years abroad. The palace gates opened wide. Crowds filled the streets, waving banners, chanting his name. Okoro! The Prince of Mercy! Inside, his mother waited by the royal court, dressed in traditional Koro beads. When he approached, she placed her hands on his shoulders. You brought honor not just to this throne, she said tearfully, but to our name, to every son who ever fell and stood again. He smiled softly. I didn't come to rule, mother. I came to serve. And she replied, Then you already rule, in hearts. Sound, uplifting music with African percussion and modern orchestra blend. Within 2 years, Daniel's story became a movement across Africa and beyond. His foundation funded schools, orphanages, and mentorship programs in rural towns. Universities began to teach his story as part of ethics and leadership courses. In an exclusive global interview, a reporter asked, Your Highness, after all that was done to you, don't you ever wish you'd fought back? Daniel smiled slowly, eyes thoughtful. I did fight back, he said softly. Just not with anger, with grace. Because the loudest revenge is peace that can't be broken. The interviewer sat silent, unable to speak. Daniel continued. The ones who humiliated me once taught me that true royalty isn't worn, it's lived. The world listened. And for the first time, millions understood what it meant to wear a crown within. Sound, evening wind, crickets, soft piano fading into flute. Years later, Daniel stood alone at the same university courtyard where his journey began. Now older, wiser, dressed in a simple white robe. He watched students laugh, walk, and learn freely. He smiled. Beside him stood a small boy, clutching a book. Sir? The boy asked shyly. They say you used to study here. Is it true? Daniel chuckled. Yes, little one. And they say I fell here, too. But you're a prince now, the boy said proudly. Daniel knelt, placing a hand on his shoulder. Remember this, your worth isn't given by crowns or classrooms. It's born inside you. Protect it. Guard it. The boy nodded. Daniel rose, gazing at the setting sun. Some stories end with vengeance. But his ended with virtue. He was humiliated publicly, yes. But when he rose, the world bowed, not to his title, but to his light.